Lexington's first ever BourbonCon will be held at the Lexington Marriott Griffin Gate on January 20th and 21st. BourbonCon is a weekend of all things bourbon, including tastings with over 30 distillery partners, panel discussions from leading industry professionals, a celebrity chef cooking demonstration with Food Network's Jeffrey Zakarian, and more. We'll be there all weekend and would love for you to join us. Tickets are on sale now at www.bourboncon.lex.com.
With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing really great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You know what today is, Matt?
The final episode of season 3.
Well, you know what that is, but do you know what else today is?
It is not the Ides of March. I don't know.
No, it's not the Ides of March. We're still in December. No, it is the 4-year anniversary of the creation of the Bourbon Life Instagram.
No kidding.
Yeah, so 4 years ago today, December 29th, 2018, I actually posted the very first post for the Bourbon Life on Instagram, and the rest, as they say, is almost history.
Man, so you got in at least one good year before you met me.
I did.
Brought me along,
That's right.
and the downward spiral happened.
Yeah, whatever, man. Now we're like prestige worldwide.
I don't even know what that means, but I guess it sounds good.
You've never seen Step Brothers? Anyway, I'll digress. We'll move on from that. But we are the Bourbon Life Podcast, presented by BourbonCon. If you're not familiar with BourbonCon, check them out. It's presented by Lexington Marriott's Griffin Gate. It's going to be in January, I think the 20th and 21st, and Matt and I will be there. We're hopefully going to be recording a podcast live on site. So that should be fun.
Live, like in person live?
In person, like in front of a live audience. So people
like
can
not in
actually
your
come
basement?
Not in the basement, not around the table, not on Squadcast like tonight. It's going to be you and me and a live guest in front of a live audience that can heckle and throw things if they choose to do so. But I think we're going to have a good time. But BourbonCon, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's bourboncon.lex.com. Check them out. We appreciate their support and their sponsorship. We also want to thank all of our other sponsors for everything they do for us. Matt, with that said, man, why don't we go ahead and get into the show and tell everybody who we have with us?
Let's do it. We're going to take a deep dive into Woodinville Whiskey today, and we are so happy to have our guest with us. She is the development manager at Woodinville outside of Seattle in Washington, Ariel Jahn. Ariel, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Well, thank you both so much for having me. I'm excited to talk all things Woodinville and bourbon tonight.
Yeah, that'll be great. And I heard Matt talking earlier, since we can see each other, the hockey stick. So you're a hockey fan, it looks like.
It is my husband's Tampa Bay Lightning fan for life, and he's very proud to display that. And we share an office, so you get to see his half.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I knew Matt. I heard him talking about it. So Matt, I'm sure Matt gave you the rundown on his hockey history. So
awesome. I think it's a really fun sport to watch, and I don't know anything about sports, so saying something.
See, I'm not going to say anything because I know how much Matt likes hockey. So I'm just gonna
It's all us Northerners still have left.
That's it. That's all you have, right? So, well, Ariel, I'll tell you what. The way we like to do the show, we like to talk about what we're drinking because we will drink a different expression during each round.
Okay.
And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. I don't like to call it an interview because I think it's it's wrong terminology. I like it to be a conversation, and that's what it turns out to be. You know, so it's just like some friends sitting around drinking, and we have met several times, which is really cool. So really excited to get you on the show finally. I think the last time we saw each other was at the Bourbon Crusaders,
Such a fun
the
event.
Straight from the Heart over in Louisville, right?
Yes, it was awesome. Unbelievable. It was great to see everyone, and also, you know, the amount that people supported the charity and all of the great expressions we got to try, but also people we got to share a dream with.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it's always fun, you know, to get to see people. It's nice when you get to do these shows like this with you. I mean, because you're out in Washington, correct?
I am actually in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh.
Surprise!
Oh. Wow.
I'm a born and raised Kentucky girl now selling Washington bourbon and rye. So it is a conundrum, but very exciting.
That's awesome. Well, we should have told you to come over here to Lexington and hang out with us. We could have had prosciutto.
Yes. Well, we'll just have to do round 2 sometime.
That's right. Yeah. So getting back to the whiskey, why don't you tell everybody what we have poured up on this first round, if you would, please?
Yes, definitely. Well, being a Kentucky girl, I would have to say bourbon is my favorite from any distillery, but also any spirit. If I was on a deserted island, bourbon would be the style of whiskey I'd like. And I love ours. It's a high rye mash bill, so you get quite a bit of spice, but there's also quite a bit of corn in it. 72% corn, 22% rye, 6% malted barley as our mash bill. Age it for 5 years in heavily toasted and heavily charred barrels with 18 months seasoned wood. So I feel like it's the best of all the worlds that you can have come together for this craft whiskey, and it is definitely the one I drink the most.
Okay. And this is a 90 proofer, and it's aged 5 years, like you said, right? So, okay, great. Matt, what are you picking up on in terms of the nose on this one?
Oh, the nose is really delightful. It's got a nice big nose of good cherry that I pick up right off of it. Like nice, sweet Luxardo cherry. There's spice in there too. I pick up a good amount of cinnamon, and I think the toasted qualities of the barrel come through. Nice vanilla, nice caramel, kind of that marshmallowy toasted notes. The good oak on the nose through that as well. It's just really, really delightful.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. And that's kind of funny. When you said heavily charred, heavily toasted, I think in my mind I instantly started thinking marshmallows. Creme brulee, brown sugar.
Yeah.
So you do get some of those notes, but it's not like a double oaked or something like that where it's out of, character, where you've got one thing that jumps out and really smacks you in the face, which, I don't mind, because when I drink a double oak, that's what I want, right?
Delicious, yes.
Yeah, right. So, but with this one, it's like you can pick that up as just an overall part of the nose and quality. Matt, the cherry, that obviously jumped out to me as well. That's great. Those spices, 22 rye, that's fairly high. I mean, that's nice. So yeah, I pick up that spiciness. That's really good on the nose. Ariel, what do we miss? Let me ask you this: what did Matt miss on the nose?
Well, I usually say creme brulee, so you picked up on that for sure. And what I think is fun too, that nice, I would say it varies between cherry or apple. A lot of people pick that up on the nose, which is awesome that you brought that up as well. There's a fruit orchard right next to the farm that grows our grain. So I wonder if that has anything to do with the terroir of the land and all that. Because, Washington is known for cherries and apples together. So
very cool. Yeah. Very fun. I almost get I'm starting to get like a hint of citrus maybe in there. I mean, I don't know if you guys get that or not, but maybe I'm just looking for it and finding it. But it seemed like the third or fourth sniff, I started getting just a slight little bit of it, maybe an orange.
Some herbal undertones, like nice lemongrass or something.
Okay.
Like a nice soft earthen undertone to it as well. Really, again, just delightful.
Yeah. And it's not out of balance at all, So when you think about a heavily charred, heavily toasted, like I said, it just conjures up image of something like the 1910 or the double oak, something like that, where it's a little out of balance with that sweetness and that toastiness. But yeah, not at all. Very nice, very complex, but very well balanced on the nose for sure. and we'll jump into the palate here in a few minutes. But let's talk about you, Ariel. That's why you're here.
Awesome.
Let's talk about you. Let's talk about what you mentioned earlier. So you're from Louisville, and you're still in Louisville right now, right?
Yeah, so I was in Seattle for 5 years, and at the start of the pandemic, the stars aligned. I'd been traveling full time, and my husband had gotten laid off, and I was like, hey, is it a possibility that I could move back home, and I'll just, move during the 2-week shutdown, and I'll be back on the road again. And that's all we thought was going to happen. And clearly, very different story played out.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I have been traveling for Woodinville now since 2018 and launched every market that we're currently in. And so with that, I'm pretty much never in Louisville, even though I live in Louisville. And so it's been pretty awesome to be a Kentucky girl now selling this Washington bourbon and rye. But I had an awesome 5 years living out in Washington as well.
Very, very cool. So you're from Louisville, but now you did not go to school here, correct?
I went to high school here, and then I went to college in Northern Virginia at George Mason University.
All right. And then at that point you decided, hey, I think I'm going to move out west. Was that kind of the idea?
Exactly. I met my husband. We were both working in restaurants, and we were like, we could live anywhere in the United States. If you can work in a restaurant in DC, you can work in a restaurant anywhere. So we took a 5-week road trip across the country, had no idea where we were going to live, what we were going to do. I ended up in Washington and started working at the distillery and the tasting room to start. So I've grown with them as they've grown as a brand too, which is really awesome that they've invested in me as much as I've invested time with them. And my husband worked at some breweries and restaurants out in Seattle, and it's been an awesome ride for both of us.
Very cool. Now, did I hear this right, that you got the job because you answered an ad on Craigslist? Is that right?
That is very true. I feel like there's nothing more 2000 than seeing. I got my career started from applying to a Craigslist ad.
Yeah, that's, it's like, don't answer ads on Craigslist, don't get in cars with strangers. And now it's like, now we have Uber, and you get a job with Woodinville from answering your Craigslist. So when you started out there, did you have experience in the bourbon industry, or anybody in your family, or was it just because of your service industry experience that led you to that?
It was my service industry experience, but also my love for bourbon. The restaurant I was working at in Northern Virginia before we moved out to Washington was an American tavern. So we had lots of different bourbons. So as my shift drink every day, I would try a new whiskey, learn about as much as I could, if anything was posted on the internet, such as their mash bill or who the master distiller was or the story of the brand and all that. So they like to call me a whiskey nerd at the distillery before I moved up, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So you were a fan of bourbon then before you actually started working at the distillery?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, very, very cool. I'd like that. So you moved out there in when did you move out to Seattle?
2015. I think tomorrow's my 7-year anniversary at Woodinville.
Wow. I gotcha.
So happy anniversary to you as well.
Yeah. 4 years on the gram, but hey, your anniversary is a little more impressive than just 4 years on the gram. So happy anniversary to you. So when you started out there, what were you doing for them when you started?
I started in the tasting room, and we would have people come in. You could do a tasting, try 4 of our spirits at the time. We had tours on the weekend. It was definitely a much smaller operation than what we have going on right now, but we were in the heart of wine country. So in the town of Woodinville, outside of Seattle, there's over 100 winery tasting rooms. And the corner that we sit on, Chateau Ste. Michelle and Columbia Winery right there. So I would say a good 15% of our guests had never even been to a distillery or tried whiskey, which was crazy. They'd walk in and be like, I'm here to taste wine, but we saw this, so we got to go. So it was a really interesting experience talking to people who are so novice in the distilled spirits category, not just bourbon, and then explaining to them the different laws and what we had going on. But then you would have people, of course, who were seeking Woodinville out and coming there just for the distillery and not necessarily all the wineries around.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then you moved into a national brand ambassador role. Is that right?
I did, yes. So I became their first salesperson. And then once we got acquired by Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, they had salespeople, so I didn't necessarily need to be a salesperson, but more telling the story of the brand, educating trade and consumers. So I moved into this national brand ambassador role. And I did that for quite a few years before, of course, I asked for more responsibility. And I got to where I am now.
You're one of those people then, huh?
Yes, I am.
So I'm just curious, just so for our listeners, just so they understand, when you say national brand ambassador, and we've had a few people on that have done that. We had like Bernie Lovers from Heaven Hill on a couple months ago. But can you kind of talk about that in terms of your role as a national brand ambassador, what that means and what you do for the brand itself?
Absolutely. I would say from the outside looking in, it looks like a dream job. You get to travel around to different cities and talk about the whiskey that you love, and you get to try it and taste it and pour it for people. And sometimes that's great and dandy, but also sometimes you're like, dang, I really want to go to bed at a normal hour tonight, not drink cocktails till midnight. But everybody has a downfall to their job. And so I would say I really broke down the position into 3 different categories. You work with your distributor. So as we all know, there's a 3-tier system in the United States. So we can't legally sell. We have to go through a distributor. So making sure that they're fans of the brands, they know how to talk about it when you're not around. So you go out with them on what we call distributor work with or market work with. They're showing you their best accounts, and you get to go see some really cool places in whatever city you're in. And then working with the trade, without these bartenders and really almost mini ambassadors, once they get excited about something, they'll sell it to everyone at the restaurant or bar when you're not there. So it's really cool to see how people can get passionate about different things. And sometimes it's not even the whiskey itself, but how it plays in a cocktail. And they can talk about, this is my creation and I chose this whiskey because of the flavor profile and this and that. And then also the consumer, obviously, without the consumer, there wouldn't be as big of a market. And, the retail space, going to do liquor store tastings and just training those liquor store teams, but also tasting events, happy hours, pairing dinners, all that jazz. So it's super fun that you get to talk to people in every facet, if it's in a work capacity doing sales or also getting people excited about the brand and telling the story.
Yeah. And for you, going on site, having that experience in the industry, that's got to be a plus for you to be able to, because you can relate to what these people go through on a regular basis every day, dealing with customers and service and everything. So that had to be helpful, correct?
Super helpful. I would say if I didn't have that restaurant experience, I don't know if I'd be so successful in my role right now.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Matt, let's jump back to the whiskey real quick. We're drinking the Woodinville, the Straight, I almost said Kentucky.
Washington bourbon for you tonight.
The Straight Bourbon whiskey, the 90 proofer. Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
On the palate, I get a good bit of like real nice cornbread, and then like a honey graham cracker type flavor. So there is definitely some sweetness. To me, it's coming across as honey, and that graham cracker, it just has kind of those like baked notes as well. And then the finish, I'll get to that in a second. But before we get to the finish, I get like right before the finish starts a little bit of cocoa or like dark chocolate on the palate. And then that cherry and the toasted oak really come through on the finish for me. Nice, good finish, nice oily finish. The cherry really comes through and really shines on the finish for me.
Yeah. And and you said this is 5 years. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So, you do get some of the grain, which is great. Because I love to be able to taste that in a whiskey. You get that corn forward a little bit, which is good. The sweetness from it. It reminds me, Matt, like I've said frosted flakes in the past, where you get kind of that corn flavor, but you get that sweetness with it. And to me, that always kind of translates into almost like a frosted flake type of flavor. Does that make sense, Ariel?
I like that. It's definitely true. I think a lot of that like sweetness too comes from the toasting. You get almost that vanilla-like sweetness that I would expect in a frosted flake.
Yeah, and then you get that spiciness as well, which is nice. That 22% rye that does come through. And again, this is one of those whiskeys where you kind of get that battle between sweet and spice. You can taste that sweetness and it lingers on your palate, but then that spice kicks in too, and you get that nice tingle, that nice spiciness, almost like a cinnamon. So it competes kind of back and forth between that corn sweetness, but then that cinnamon spiciness. and it lingers. The palate for me lingers. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I think for 90 proof, it's good and oily. It's got a nice, long, memorable finish and just a good palate. It's a great drinker. The nose was just absolutely delightful, and the palate does not let the nose down in the least.
Yeah, good point. So Ariel, again, what Matt miss?
No, I think that's all right on the money. I do like to say creme brulee on the palate. You know how it does linger, like a bite of creme brulee. It just keeps on going. You get that sweetness with that little bit of, caramelized sugar on the finish as well. And the baking spices for me come through quite a bit. So I definitely get that cinnamon clove. But I have not heard graham cracker, and I really like that tasting note. And now that I've tasted it again and I've had cheesecake with some graham crackers recently, it definitely resonates.
You're going to have to write that down and, give Matt credit. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, definitely.
So Ariel, let's talk about the job now, because we talked about the national brand ambassador and how when you started there as well. But now talk about your role as the development manager. So what does that mean, and if there is a typical day? There may not be, but what does that role look like now for you?
There is no typical day, which I think makes the job awesome.
Right.
I'm not dreading anything because every day is different. So now we have a team of 7 regional ambassadors and sales managers that I manage. So similar to the national brand ambassador role, they're doing that on a regional level. And so I make sure that they have all their needs day to day, and also do their expenses and recapping and tracking their KPIs or key performance indicators and all that day to day that goes with managing, but also developing programs for the coming years, making sure that our current programs, working with the trade or retail or anything like that, is going from 0 to 100, and it's not just falling to the wayside. So a lot of that is still doing similar things, just on a more business-like level. So I'm still working with the distributor in a lot of capacities, still working with the trade, and I occasionally go out and do consumer events where I will work the whiskey festivals or whiskey fairs and be the face of the brand for certain events. So I would say there's some overlap between national brand ambassador and what I'm doing now, but it's definitely how are we going to get the whiskey sold more so than just doing the marketing side of it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, in this new role, I mean, do you miss some of the aspects of the national brand ambassador that you're maybe not having as much contact as you used to and being out as much? Or is it you're like, yes, I can still do some things, but I'm content to be at home a little more?
I would say I'm content to have the level that I am public facing right now. And I don't have to be out all the time, and I get to see kind of more behind the scenes. And I would say there is a beauty of it, though. If you are super extroverted and you want to be out and about with people all the time, I don't think people would enjoy my role as much in this day-to-day. They would much prefer the national brand ambassador. But at this point in my life, I'm excited to have a little bit of both and not necessarily be so behind the scenes that I can't touch people and hear their stories and how they fell in love with Woodinville or when the first time they tried it was and all that jazz. But the mix right now is my perfect scenario.
Nice. So not only you get to see how the sausage is made now, but you also get to go out and enjoy the sausage with the customers, right?
Exactly.
Matt, come on, Matt. We're on this prosciutto pork.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Oh man, come on. Well, no, that sounds like a lot of fun. So it sounds like you've got a great job, and it sounds like the perfect mix. So do you consider yourself to be an extrovert, or are you more introverted?
I would definitely say I'm an extrovert, because even if I'm at home and don't want to, do too much, we still end up going out.
Okay.
More
All right.
than we need to.
I got you. All right. I was just wondering if it was like you got in that role as national brand ambassador, and it was, a little bit of having to force yourself to do that role, to do those things. And I can understand if somebody gets in that role, if they're not super extroverted, it could be difficult at times, right? So
yeah, I think if it's every week for a long period of time, that's when it gets hard. But if you are on the road 2 to 3 weeks, and you have a week at home, then you're back out 2 to 3 weeks, then you have a week at home, and you can recharge your batteries a little bit, I think that's a great balance in that role.
Nice. Very nice. So Matt, back to the whiskey. Final thoughts on the straight bourbon. What do you think?
A great introduction for the evening to Woodinville. Excited to see where our next 2 rounds are going to take us.
Yeah, definitely. Really, really enjoy it. Like I said, the nose, everything was very pleasant. The palate, the finish, everything, just a nice, very nice bourbon. I mean, just well-rounded, well-balanced. And that spiciness on that palate, I really like that little bit of spiciness that comes through. Can't get past that one just yet, Ariel.
Good. I love it.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back in just a minute with more with Ariel Jahn, the development manager with Woodinville Whiskey, in just a minute.
Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com.
Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsofFrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the second round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, still hanging out. Thank you, Matt, for sticking around. I appreciate that. Out there in front of that nice warm fireplace. How you doing out there, man?
Hey, I'm doing great, Mark. You got the fireplace on for me. It's nice and cozy here in the Bourbon Life Studios, and we are wrapping up season 3.
I know, this is great, Matt. And you know what? Can you imagine from sitting around my kitchen island up there the first night that we did this, and trying to convince you originally to actually do the podcast, and then finally getting you to do it. Can you imagine? I mean, it's been almost 3 years, man. Does it seem possible?
I can't believe that we have convinced so many amazing guests to sit down with us, and so far we haven't had a single one leave midway.
No, I know. Hopefully that trend holds through. We'll get through season 3 tonight successfully and not have anybody walk out on us. We've yet to have a guest come just stand up and say, "Look, we are out of here." So we hope that trend continues. But Matt, we've been very fortunate. I agree, man. We've had some incredible guests. And we got a great guest tonight as well. So really thrilled about that. But we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by BourbonCon. Check them out at BourbonConLex.com. Get information about the event that's coming up in January. Gosh, I can't believe it's going to be 2023 in 3 days? Goodness. Great. By the time this podcast comes out, it will be the new year? No, it comes out tomorrow.
Yeah. Don't rush things here, Mark. Come on.
Man, almost. So, but anyway, check them out, BourbonConLex.com. It's going to be a great event. We appreciate their sponsorship. Matt, with that said, do you want to tell everybody again who we have with us?
Absolutely. We are back hanging out with Ariel Jahn, the development manager at Woodinville Whiskey. And we are super excited to have you back and super excited to hear about what we've got poured up here at round 2.
Yes, well, super excited to be back on here. And I like to say rye, not have some whiskey. This is our 100% rye, so super unique mash bill that you're about to try. Similar to our bourbon, it is a 18-month seasoned wood, heavily toasted, heavily charred barrel, aged for 5 years. And with that 100% rye, it is no joke coming in there. I think the terroir is a little different than maybe some Midwestern ryes that you might be used to trying. Volcanic soil next to those apple orchards, you're going to get a lot of spice, but I get a lot of fruit and floral notes as well. So excited to hear the specific things that you pick out of it.
Well, I mean, you couldn't set it up better for me to say, I'm going to throw it to Matt and see.
Appreciate that.
That was great, Ariel. Thank you so much. You can come on every week and just set it up so I can just say, Matt, what do you pick up on the nose over there?
Oh, there's really crisp green apple is like the first thing that really stands out to me. Like really nice, sour, crisp, Granny Smith apple. Then those baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove. It's like almost a little cardamom or like some like a little bit of softer baking spices with it as well. Nice toasted aroma from the oak. It's certainly not like as earthy as I might have thought, just seeing that this is 100% rye and it's pot distilled, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Sometimes you get some nice funk coming through with pot distilled, but it's not as earthy as I was expecting, which I'm enjoying the nose again. Like it's another just really great nose, not as spicy and peppery as some of them. Like really just earthy, fruity, crisp. Nice apple, toasted and charred notes on it as well. Just
it's funny, Matt. I mean, because I get that what you're talking about the apple. I get the herbal qualities seem to be coming through as well. For me, I pick up some herbal notes to it, but I almost get like a maple syrupy type of aroma to it. Maybe it's because I'm thinking creme brulee from the bourbon, but I'm thinking with that toasted, maybe with the heavily charred, heavily toasted, and with the rye, that for me it's kind of lending to a little bit of a almost like a maple syrup sweetness that comes through. I get a lot of the spice, Matt, like you said, the baking spices, but there's just like a hint somewhere. Every once in a while, when I put it up to my nose, I just get like this little hint of almost like a maple syrupiness to it. But I agree with everything else you said, that kind of crisp apple, Matt, that comes through. There's a herbalness that comes through as well. So, all right, Ariel, tell us how we did.
I think it's pretty great. Sometimes I would say I get almost more of a honey note than maple syrup, but
okay, all right.
Maple syrup is great too. And I wouldn't say you all missed anything. That spice comes through, and I'm definitely getting a lot of sweetness tonight, which is hit or miss. Sometimes I feel like after I have it, after the bourbon, I get more of that spice right away. But that sweetness is definitely coming through, and I don't know if it's not my mind is tricking me. It does smell more like maple syrup than honey.
It's the voodoo that I've put on you tonight, Ariel. Talking about
that sweetness to me is like a candied ginger, because it's like a little like earth and more of the like ginger coming through. But you're right, both of you. Mark, you're right, and of course Ariel, you're right. There is a sweetness to it as well that's really inviting.
Yep. No doubt about that. It's very good. And I think the thing was when you said it's 100% rye, and in my mind, it's not a 95.5 rye. This is 100% rye. So, and I guess in my mind, I instantly thought, oh, this is going to be very super spicy before I nosed it. Just because when you think 100% rye, I don't know. For me, I just think it's going to be super spicy, but not at all.
Right. I definitely would think 100% rye would be fighting whiskey, after a long day. Like, just pour me something strong, 100% rye, sure. But I think this is a little more delicate than that. And I think a lot of it is our yeast strain, but also that the rye is grown in Eastern Washington. And now the farmers that grow our grain are actually the largest rye growers in the state of Washington. So very unique. And it's not Canadian rye or Eastern European rye, or I know there's some experimental rye being grown here in Kentucky. So you're going to get different flavor profiles from all those different terroirs.
Yeah, very cool. So in terms of 100% rye, so a 95.5, you're talking about malted rye. So this isn't malted rye. This is 100% rye.
100% rye. Nothing is malted in it.
Okay. So you're using enzymes for the process to get that. Okay.
Yes, non-GMO enzymes to jumpstart the process and turn all that starch into sugar into alcohol.
Yeah. Can you kind of explain that just so people out there understand what that, I mean, we understand what that means, but for our listeners that may not know the process that in detail, can you talk about that just a little bit?
Definitely. Well, back in the day before technology and, we were all trying to figure out what was going on in whiskey and using extra crops and all that. Malted grains were really great, but they have a natural enzyme in them that turns that starch into sugar and sugar into alcohol. So that's typically why you see malted barley in a lot. of your mash bills, either rye or bourbon. And you also see malted rye in some things and whatnot. But in technology in this day and age, you can eliminate those enzymes just to be a supplement, I guess, into the whiskey. So you get a consistent batch to batch. You can convert almost everything into the alcohol so that you're having more consistent fermentations. And we actually use it for our bourbon as well. And most people are using enzymes in this day and age because the enzymes that you get in malted barley can change from batch to batch as well, just like, your sugar content can change from batch to batch, or your moisture content and all that. So it keeps a more consistent batch, I guess, with your fermentation to get the most out of it. Obviously, we want to get as much alcohol as we can from each batch to be efficient, and most distilleries want to be as efficient as possible. So I think it's a very unspoken thing about enzymes, because clearly there's an industry around it, or it'd be very hard for us to find this.
Yeah, right. And I think people just want to feel like, oh, there's just grains in this, there's nothing added. And I think sometimes if you say we add enzymes to assist the process, the conversion from starch to sugar, it's like, oh, you do what? I mean, some people think there's something wrong with that, but it doesn't impact the flavor. It just affects the process and helps it along. So how's it working with 100% rye? I'm just curious, from a mash bill, from a mashing perspective, fermentation. I mean, that's got to be a big mess.
It's a big mess. I like to say it's an angry mash bill. And so being at Woodinville now for 7 years, I've seen it from when we've been a lot smaller, and it's, way more hands-on, the learning curve and all that, to now we pretty much have it dialed in. So instead of fermenting nice and pretty like most of those open tanks you've seen at Kentucky distilleries, where the bourbon mash will kind of go side to side and it's bubbling but not on top of each other, our rye mash bill likes to build those bubbles on top of each other. And if you don't take care of that tension on the top of the surface, you can have a 2-story, which is how tall our fermentation tanks are, rye mash waterfall down into the floor. So it is sticky and stinky and messy and all of the above. It also can form quite a thick cake on the top, so you kind of have to break it up after the fermentation starts to slow. And it bubbles so much more in our still. So we have a pot and column system. So it starts in the pot. That's basically the first distillation, then goes over to the column to get refined. It is so big and angry that it sometimes gets into the column, creating a bigger mess, and will start to creep up into the column, even though typically with our bourbon mash bill, that is only alcohol in there. So creates a much bigger mess to clean. So rye is a feisty little whiskey, making it, and I would say drinking it as well. I can drink bourbon neat all day, but rye, I don't think I could do the same.
So let's talk about the brand. Let's talk about Woodinville and talk about, how they started, the history. Can you share with our listeners about the brand and how it got started and who actually started it?
Absolutely. So in 2008, the laws changed where you could legally distill in Washington for the first time since Prohibition, which I think is wild when you think about all the craft breweries like Red Hook, and then craft winery, Chateau Ste. Michelle, which is clearly not craft anymore. They're a huge powerhouse. But Columbia Winery and all these other wineries and breweries that were coming out of Washington. But no distillation was happening until 2008, which is wild. So Brett and Orlin, our 2 founders, went to high school and college together, always dreamed of going into business together, but never quite knew what to do. Orlin became an airline pilot after college, and Brett was in construction material sales. They both saw this article that the laws were changing, you could legally distill, and they're like, maybe that's what we should do. So the next time they got together over a bottle of bourbon, they were like, hey, I saw this thing. And the other one was like, I saw this thing. And it ended up that they were both looking into opening a craft distillery. So they decided to do it, put pen to paper, cashed in their 401ks, sold their homes, started applying for small business loans. 14 banks later, in the town of Woodinville, which is about 20 miles from downtown Seattle, this bank had seen all these boutique wineries do really well in the economic downturn and said, hey, even though your whiskey will be tied up, we're going to invest in you. We think you're going to do something awesome. And so that was the final bit of money they needed to open up the distillery. And they got all this equipment in, they had their space, and realized they had no idea how to make whiskey. They were reading these distillation textbooks, and it was a foreign language, and they started calling people, and they're like, hey, do you know anyone who can come teach us how to distill? And that's when they got Dave Pickerell's phone number.
Man, I tell you what, you can't, yeah. I mean, that's, wow.
Wild, for sure. I mean, at that time, he was still with Makers, but about to retire. So everyone kind of knew he was looking to see what the next step was. So Orland called him up and said, hey, we're some guys in Washington. We want you to come teach us how to distill. And Dave was like, slow down. And he was like, okay, I'm at the grocery store. I'll call you back. And they didn't get a call back soon enough. So like, we have to make a splash. So Orland flew out to Chicago to the Whiskey Fest that he was, I think it was his last big event with Makers, and stood in line, was one of those people who ran to the booth immediately as he could and said, hey, I'm Orland Sorensen. We really want you to come out to Woodinville to teach us how to distill. And so he said, all right, I'm coming. He loved the gesture so much. So he was there the first day we milled any grain, mashed it for the first time, fermented it, all of the above. So he taught us out of the gate how to make the best whiskey we could. It wasn't like they had to learn from their mistakes or any of that.
Wow. And Dave was a legend in the industry. Did you get to work with Dave at all? Did you know
I
him
didn't, unfortunately. Okay. I came after he had done a lot with him. So we did White Dog whiskey tastings with Dave. We sold these Groupon experiences. So we sold White Dog and vodka for the first 2 years, and you could come out and learn how to make some cocktails with White Dog, and Dave would teach everyone what White Dog was, but then also what the whiskey would soon become after aged for a while. And so they like to say it was the best investment they could ever made. And he started as a mentor, but then became a friend, which I think is really cool that they got to spend so much time with him.
Yeah, very cool. And Dave unfortunately passed away. I think it was 2018. So, yeah. But awesome that they got to work with him and learn from him. So now you guys never sourced any whiskey. Is that right?
Correct. We sold White Dog and vodka for the first 2 years, and then we did a micro-barrel program. They were 8-gallon barrels. Same whiskey that you're tasting today, but aged a little under 2 years in these tiny 8-gallon barrels. Very dark, very tannic compared to what you have going on now, but it was a start to see what the whiskey could become. And it was great because we were one of the first distilleries in Washington State, so people really embraced it. And we got to sell this micro-barreled bourbon and rye all over until we had our first 5-year-old bourbon batch come out in 2015, and then the following year our rye.
Yeah, that's very cool. Matt, let's jump back over to the rye and talk about it in terms of the palate and the finish. What do you get on this?
On the palate, I pick up there's a sweetness, but also like a floral quality that to me was like honeysuckle, kind of right at the start of the palate. Then rye grain comes through, that nice, like kind of crisp rye grain. Then it's got a sweetness almost that reminds me of like almond biscotti. And then the finish has got like the toasted qualities from the barrel come through. Nice, a little bit of that marshmallowy, a little bit of the toasted oak, and comes through on the finish with it as well. And some of that green apple shines through late in the finish.
Yeah, you may say I'm crazy, but I almost get like a little bit of a coffee taste on the palate. I don't know if you guys pick any of that up or not, but it's almost like a malted whiskey, which sounds weird to say that because I know it's not, but it's almost, when I drink it, it has a reminder to me in terms of the palate to something that's been malted, which I can't explain that. So I don't know, maybe my palate's just off.
I'm going to have some malted whiskey after this. I think I've got some of that New Riff 100% malted rye, so I can do a little comparison after.
There you go. It's funny because, I mean, Matt, I agree. I mean, you pick up some of the herbalness, the spiciness as well, but there's just this little note that keeps coming back in terms of, it's on the palate, but then it lingers on the finish. And it almost comes across like a coffee note to me. So I don't know. Ariel, what else is out there that we missed?
I wouldn't say you missed anything that I don't normally say, but I'm going to say something strange that I've never said about a rye before, and I think it's because I've had mulled wine recently, but I'm getting a lot of that, not necessarily the wine or tannic finish of it, but kind of like those clove and almost orange spice that comes through when you're drinking a glue vine or something like that. I don't know if you all have had any recently, but I'm definitely getting a little bit of that.
I have not, but every time I hear mulled wine, I think about It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know if you've watched that movie or not.
I love that movie. One of my favorites.
So, when Clarence and George go into the bar and Clarence is trying to decide what he wants to drink, and he's like, I think I'd like a mulled wine. And then he's like, no, I want a flaming rum punch. It's like, Anyway, I'll stop Matt. Matt's shaking his head over there.
It's all right. 'Tis the season.
Yeah, that's right. It is. That's right. So we talked about it a little bit earlier that you guys, everything is pot distilled. You got a pot and a column, so it's a hybrid still, right? So the initial process works off in that pot. Well, can you talk about that so our listeners understand what that means when you say it's a pot with a column?
Absolutely. So I would say it's backwards from a lot of Kentucky distilleries, where you start in the column and you get your low wines, and then you put it into a doubler, and then you get your high wines, and that's where you're collecting off. So basically doing the opposite of that, but it starts in a large pot still where we put the fermented mash in. It's 3,000 gallons, or excuse me, I always get the conversions wrong. 1,300 liters. So I'm just going to stop talking right now.
Is it 300 gallons maybe? Or no?
Okay, so it's 5,000 liters, 1,300 gallons. That's what it is. Sorry. I should be able to recite this like nobody's business, but the liters to gallons and Fahrenheit to Celsius, it still gets me. That's why I'm in this position and not the one making the whiskey.
But we've got you, and we got you drinking tonight too, so you've got an excuse, Ariel. So don't worry about it.
Yes. Okay. So 1,300 gallons, 5,000 liters. We put that fermented mash in there. Start to collect that first distillate off. It goes from about 9 to 10% alcohol in that fermented mash to 25% alcohol, and then we funnel it over into the column. And there's 8 refraction plates in there that act as a little mini distillation or superometer plates to get it from that 50% or 50 proof to 140 proof. So it takes it up just a little bit every plate. And then from that 140 proof, which is what we think we get the best grain flavor, with high enough alcohol, that's what we try to collect off the still. So we run it through our condenser at that point. So it takes that hot vapor into a cool liquor. And so with the pot still, you are supposed to get a lot of the grain flavor still left behind versus kind of the column. If you start in a column, it just turns it into an alcohol really quickly without necessarily keeping all those oils and esters that you want left behind. And so that's why we decided the pot and column hybrid was better than starting in a column still and going to that doubler.
Yeah, and that makes sense because you're going to keep those congeners, you're going to keep that flavor profile, you're going to keep a lot of the things that you want to keep, like you said, because in that column still, you've got all those plates, and each plate, so people understand that each plate is basically a process where you are distilling. So another distillation takes place at each plate, and each time you do that, you're stripping out certain flavors, certain things, the esters, the congeners, whatever else. So you don't want to strip out too much. If you go too high, you're going to be like a vodka at 190 proof or a neutral grain spirit. But that's cool that you guys use the pot still, and then you also add that column still in, so you can get the proof up, but you don't lose the flavor that you all want to maintain. So you come off the still then at 140. Is that what you said?
At 140. That's what we think the best flavor is. And honestly, I think our White Dog is pretty good. I mean, White Dog at a lot of distilleries is pretty good unless they're distilling it to a really high proof, and then it just tastes like ethanol. Yeah. That's good.
Matt, we'll have to make a trip out to Washington sometime so we can try the White Dog.
Yeah. We'd love to have you.
Let's take our 5-week road trip.
Oh, there you go. We're going to have to do that.
I'm sure you can find a lot of distilleries along the way.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure we can find some things to get into, right? We can make it worthwhile. So Matt, let's get, we're at the end of round 2 here. So let's talk about final thoughts on this rye. What do you think?
I love it. 100% rye. It's hitting exactly what I like to see. It's got some unique notes to it, but also not as off the wall and crazy as one might expect from 100% rye with enzymes. I think it strikes a really nice balance. It's very approachable. It's certainly not like a fighting words type rye that's just going to knock you around. There's a lot of flavor in it, a lot of character to it. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Matt. I really enjoy this rye. 90 proof, easy to drink. Not going to burn anybody up. Lots of nice characteristics and good flavors to that. So yeah, really nice, Ariel. Really enjoy it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Great. I tell you what, let's take a quick break and get a word from our sponsors. We'll be back with more with Ariel Jahn, the development manager with Woodinville Whiskey, in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, otherwise known as my basement, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there in front of that beautiful fireplace?
Mark, it's nice and toasty out here. He always takes such good care of me at the Bourbon Life Studios.
Man, you get prosciutto when you come into the house. You get your drinks poured up out there, man. You get to sit in front of the fireplace. What more could you want out of life?
I'm moving in. That's it.
There
I've
you
decided.
go. The basement. Ariel, if I had known you were in Louisville, I would have said, come over, and you could have just hung out with us and had prosciutto and bourbon tonight.
I'm so jealous.
Well, we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by BourbonCon. Check them out online at bourboncon.lex. It's going to be a really fun event in January 20th and 21st. Matt and I will be there. We're looking forward to seeing you guys. So please, if you will, log in, check that event out, get your tickets. They're going to have a great dinner on Saturday night as well. Matt and I will be there. Also, we hope to be recording. We plan to record a podcast there in front of a live audience. So that'll be
even if we're just out in the parking lot.
Even if we're in the parking lot on the back of our car, like the trunk, we'll have everything set up in the back of our car. Mm-hmm. So, or Matt, we'll take Matt's van, and we'll be in a van down by the creek, recording the podcast. So, but yeah, come out and join us. It'll be a fun time. BourbonConLex.com. Check them out. So thank them for being our sponsor. We really appreciate that. So Matt, with that said, tell everybody who we have with us in our third and final session of the podcast.
Absolutely. She is the development manager at Woodinville Whiskey, Ariel Jahn. Welcome back to round 3 of the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Well, I'm so glad to be here, and I will also be at BourbonCon.
No, are you really?
No kidding.
No, you didn't tell us that. What is
Nice. You're holding your cards close to the chest there for the first 2 rounds.
Yeah. What a shock. I saw you kind of,
that's legit.
Made a facial
I wouldn't have admit it to Mark and I if I don't know about that. Tell them I'm going to be there.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, that's cool. Are you going to be there on Saturday, or do you know what your schedule is?
I am not really sure what the schedule of events is, but I will be there.
Okay. Well, shoot, we could have done a podcast with you, but that's okay. We're closing out the year. This is exciting for me because we're closing out year number 3 with Ariel.
We're celebrating our anniversaries.
We are celebrating anniversaries, and I told you off air that Woodinville Cask Strength Bourbon was the very first bourbon that we drank on the very first official episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast 3 years ago. Isn't that crazy? That hit me today, and I'm thinking, I know I've had Woodinville, and I know I had a cask strength, and I'm like, when did I have that? And I'm old, so searching those memory banks is a little more difficult than it used to be, and I started going.
That's
back
why I write everything down for you, Mark.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Have you taken your pills yet today?
I have to make 2 pages of notes for each show, Ariel, just so I know where we're going.
I think that's smart, though. Keep it going. If there's a little conversation, you have something in your back pocket, pull it out real quick.
That's exactly right. See, I'm glad you understand it. Everybody else makes fun of me. Matt makes fun of me. We have a crew that we do episodes with once a month, and they all make fun of me for doing notes. So when we do the cruise shows, I don't do any notes. We just show up and we just record and just talk about random things because they made fun of me so much for doing the notes. So yeah, thanks for that.
It's a tough ask though, trying to keep that motley crew of savages on task. It's you're like
it is. I agree. Well, Aaron, I'm excited you're going to be at the BourbonCon though. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Sorry, I didn't throw that out sooner.
You should have. You should. But you know what? You can come over and have some prosciutto.
Oh, perfect. I'll be waiting.
That's a selling point now. Come over and hang out in the Bourbon Life Studios and have some prosciutto. Anyway, oh man. So we're having a good time. But tell everybody what we have poured up on this third and final session tonight.
I like to say this is dessert, and that's why I like to finish with it. So it is our bourbon whiskey finished in ruby port wine barrels. So after 5 years in the American oak barrels, we put it into ruby port barrels for an additional 3 to 6 months. It really depends on the time of year. And the color, so much darker, so much richer. I get a ton of that port flavor that comes through, that dried berry, that cocoa nib on the nose. I would say this is my favorite wintertime dram. I want to sit by a fireplace or fire pit, watch it snow outside, maybe not be -6 like it was last week.
Yeah.
That was a little too cold, but this is a little something to warm me up.
Hey, but cheers to all of us surviving the polar vortex that came through last week. What a nightmare. Matt, you were in Michigan, but still.
Yeah, ironically enough, I went 5 hours north to warm up in the middle of winter.
To warm up. That's right. He was a little warmer up there than we were down here in Kentucky. So, Matt, what do you pick up on this one in terms of the nose?
It's definitely got that ruby fruit nose to it. A lot of red wine fruits. There's like that nice musty sweet grape on it. Dark berries, a little bit of currant. Call me crazy, but I almost pick up like a touch of grapefruit, or like some sort of there's like a little bit of a citrus, not like super bright like a lemon or lime, but a kind of a savory citrus to it as well. And then the sweetness again comes through from like a sweet toasted oak, or that barrel sweetness, kind of that creme brulee or toasted sugar that we were talking about, not just a fruit sweetness, but like a sugared sweetness as well, but in a very savory manner, not like a corn syrup type sweetness.
And it's kind of funny because I get that kind of the dried grape, that dried fruit type of flavor, but it's almost like it accentuates that barrel toast and that barrel char, like that creme brulee flavor to me that we talked about before. It almost punches out even more so with this port finish. So I don't know, maybe it's just a combination of the flavors, but very sweet, very, very nice, very just creme brulee-ish. But yeah, I can see why you say this is dessert, and this is 90 proof. Same mash bill, right? As the
same
straight bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so 5-year-old bourbon that's finished in these port. So now you guys are up there in wine country. I mean, you're right outside of Seattle. You're in Washington. Wine here, there, everywhere. The casks that you're finishing in, are they coming from local, or are you guys sourcing those from just other places?
Initially, we tried to get all local. We worked with winemakers like Tori Moore, Brian Carter, John Patterson, but unfortunately, dessert wine in Washington and Oregon is very small. So they said, hey, we can sell you another barrel or two, but in a year after we've used it. And we wanted this to be more of a national release, and we tried to find bigger makers. Chateau Ste. Michelle occasionally does a port finish wine, but it's not an annual release, so they didn't annually have barrels that we could get, and that's how we found our barrel broker in Portugal, who's found us some other things as well. We did a Muscatel finished bourbon whiskey recently. Those were also from Portugal, but then we've also done some local events at the distillery. It's called Taste, Choose, Bottle. It's like a single barrel tasting where you can come taste directly from one barrel. Well, there's 3 barrels next to each other, but you taste directly from each of those barrels, and then you can bottle one bottle off of it. So instead of buying a whole barrel, you just get to take a bottle off of this barrel at home. And we've done some Chardonnay, Petit Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, different barrels from local winemakers, but just one singular barrel to see how people like it, but also how our whiskey interacts with those different wine varietals.
Yeah, very, very cool. Very nice. And I saw the Muscatel today at Liquor Barn. I went up there to have lunch.
Surprise.
Yeah, I know, right? And I saw it up on the counter, and I was going to buy it, and then I left after having lunch and forgot. So I may go back up there tomorrow and pick that up. So I'm kind of curious to see how
that was
now that I've
super limited for sure. We only,
Okay.
I think, sent 500 cases around the whole country. So we sell in 25 or 23 states plus DC right now. So to think that 500 cases split up between all those different markets is very limited.
Okay, well, I need to head back up there for sure then and pick up one of those bottles. So I've got it. So let's talk about that. You're talking about the amount of production and things. We talked about the pot column. Well, I mean, in terms of production, what kind of production capacity do you all have there at the distillery?
Yeah, so we finished a big expansion in 2020 where we went from about 7 to 8 barrels a day to almost 25 barrels a day. And then at the beginning of this year, we put in new fermenters so we could keep up with the 2 new stills that we have. So we now have a 3 pot and column stills of that 5,000 liter, 1,300 gallons. Finally got the conversion where I can say it straight. And we have just started 24-hour production in the last few weeks. So we are filling about 50 barrels per day. So biggest by far in Washington, but still drops in the bucket compared to a lot of Kentucky distilleries.
Yeah, but still to go from 7 a day to 50, I mean, that's a sevenfold increase. That's pretty impressive.
It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Any concerns in terms of, I mean, you talked about earlier about your grains and stuff. So you source those in state, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're all Washington grown grain. So our corn and rye come from the Almond family farm. They're 3rd generation, soon to be 4th generation family farm. And they lease a lot of their acreage right now. So if we ever need more grain than what we have right now, they can get land back. They clean it and dry it, store it for us. And so we have our direct source for those grains. Then the malted barley is coming from the Palouse region, which is far eastern Washington, right before you get to Idaho. And they malt it down in Vancouver, Washington, right across from Portland, non-GMO as well. And then they send it up to us. And they supply for many breweries around the state and the Northwest. So there's no shortage of malted barley coming from them.
Okay. So no concerns in terms of keeping up with grain needs
Correct.
or anything from where so you wouldn't have to go out. You wouldn't have to outsource somewhere else.
Not at this point. I mean, maybe if we decided to do another expansion, which I don't even think we could physically fit in our current footprint, but down the road maybe, but at this point in time, not at all.
Gotcha. So you guys distill, you're coming off the still at 140. What are you guys going in the barrel at?
110. So still a little lower than the industry standard. We figured, when we started, we were only filling about a barrel a day, then to 7 to 8 barrels a day. So now 50 barrels a day, it's still not that drastic of a difference. If we were filling thousands of barrels a day, it'd probably be too much of a cost to lower the proof that much, but we think it's a good level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so sorry to interrupt, Mark, but going into the barrel at 110, some of the single barrels I've seen are like up maybe the 130 proofs. So you've got quite a lot going on in your aging process. I assume that's all attributable to the climate.
Yes, definitely. So we were aging at the same farm that grows all of our grain. We bought a little plot of land off of them. They actually supplied our original rick houses, and they said if we went under, they could just park their farm equipment in there because it looks like just a straight warehouse from the outside. Big sliding doors. They could definitely drive a tractor in there. So now we've bought a little bit of land off them, and we have a barreling and bottling facility. We have 2 rick houses that we're actually aging whiskey in and constructing a 3rd right now. Similar to Four Roses, 1-story rick houses, 6 barrels high. And it is temperature-wise very similar to Kentucky. Cold winters, hot summers, but very dry. It's an arid climate. They get less than 10 inches of precipitation every year. So I think that has to do a lot with the fluctuation from 110 proof to typically what it comes out as. I would say in our newest rick house, the rick house, it's our biggest of the oldest, if that makes sense. So we're not pulling barrels yet from the newly built ones. The temperature, I think because there was so much whiskey in it, it regulated a little easier. The temperature swings weren't so crazy to the amount of whiskey that we had in it. And so they've typically been coming out between like 115 and 118 proof. But I have seen 132 proof whiskey come out, and it is no joke.
That's awesome. That's what I'm at like a 125, 135. You know, that's
You like the hot stuff.
I like the hot stuff. What can I say? So let's talk about in terms of the process, in terms of blending. So all these come out. How many barrels are you guys putting together in terms of a blend or a batch that you're putting out?
So now that we have our new barreling and bottling facility, it's about 60 barrels per batch that we're bottling up. And then so we'll bottle a couple times a month and then send that out depending on if it's the bourbon, rye, or port. And then we typically do our single barrels just once a month, so, and get those out and keep in a timely-ish manner. I mean, it's hard with shipping and logistics. I would say that's the biggest time crunch in getting our anything shipping-wise out. But 60 barrels a batch, they're pretty consistent batch to batch. I would say if you're blind tasting, you might taste some differences just depending on what barrels were in there compared to other batches. And I would say back in the day when we were doing 12 to 20 barrel batches, it was a little more drastic than what it is now.
Right. So you guys then you blend to the profile, what you want or what you expect to be the profile for the Woodinville Rye, the Woodinville Bourbon. I mean, is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So, because I know some groups are they'll blend to whatever the barrels they have. It's like, yeah, okay, we'll just see what happens. We'll blend all this together.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
See where we come up. So you are blending to that specific profile that you're looking for. So
definitely.
Great. All right, Matt, let's jump back over here to this whiskey and talk about the palate and the finish on it. What do you get on that?
I pick up a lot of that port influence, definitely on the palate. There's like that nice mashed kind of musty grape that comes through, almost like a little blackberry, maybe some currant. But there's also like a nice sharp kind of tart note. I'm having a hard time really putting a finger on like what exactly it is, but the closest I can come is like almost a cranberry, but certainly not as bright, not as tart, but something kind of down that road along those lines. But this too, I'm tasting a lot more of the black pepper comes across with this. I think we were talking a little bit earlier about some mulling spice notes. I think this has a little bit more influence of some like the mulling spice, maybe the black pepper, a little bit of anise, coriander, but nice mulling notes, and then a good, nice, sweet, oaky finish. Again, just another really, really delicious whiskey.
Yeah, I get like little notes of leather off of this too on the palate. I don't know if that comes through. Okay, yeah, because it's like Matt, the story. When I was a kid, chewed on the baseball glove. So yes, I do know what leather actually tastes like, and yes, this reminds me of what leather tastes like. So I get that little subtle hint. But Matt, I agree with. I mean, everything else you said was obviously spot on. Nothing else stands out except that little leather note that just pops through. I really, really enjoy that. So Ariel, what else is out there that we didn't touch on?
Well, I think it's great that you said that cranberry almost that comes through. I get that definitely more in this after having some cranberry cocktails over at Christmas. We made a cranberry simple syrup, and I think this actually would play really well in an old fashioned with that. So I might have to do that with a little bit that's left over. But I definitely think almost like a dark chocolate covered cherry, like brandy cherry almost. That comes through quite a bit. And sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background.
That's
locked
okay.
her up, so I'm surprised her bark carries so much.
That's not a problem at all. You know what? Our listeners love dogs, I'm sure. So you're a dog lover, and there you go. I'm a cat lover. So hey, you know what? We got all the bases covered here.
Perfect.
But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy this. The palate, everything it's a great trait. And again, it is the same bourbon. It's just finished in those port casks. So, and you said from 3 to 6 months is how long it's finished?
Depending on the time of year. So winter takes a little bit longer, but when it's super hot in the summer, that flavor profile
Gotcha.
comes through really quick. So again, we just taste it, and once it gets to the point where we think it's consistent batch, we'll bottle it up.
Gotcha. Now, you guys, you do have a single barrel program too, right? People picking barrels. Is that right?
We do. We have a single barrel program for our bourbon and also our rye. The rye is much smaller than our bourbon that we have, but it's non-chill filtered version of both of them. So the purest form that you're going to get of Woodinville, and like we talked about earlier, it's either going to be like 115 to 118 proof, but occasionally you have an outlier.
Yeah, gotcha. So you can hit that higher proof that Matt mentioned is out there that he's seeing. So that's really cool. So we'll have to keep your eyes out for that. In terms of your job, I'm just curious, what's been the favorite part for you so far of your whole journey with Woodinville?
I would say getting to share whiskey with people all over the country and just getting to hear the stories of why they love bourbon or how they got into it. And sometimes it's people's, first bourbon experience that they're there. And then sometimes people are like, hey, let me quiz you and see how much you know. And so it's just every experience is so different, which I really appreciate. Our dogs have literally never barked this much in their lives.
That's okay.
So really
That's all right.
sorry.
They know it's the Bourbon Life Podcast. They want to. Yeah.
They really do. One of our dogs is almost mute, so it's kind of surprising that she's actually barking this much. I think my husband might be outside the house right now, and that's what they hear. So sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Hey, look, we're all human. We have pets. You know what? It's just you don't have to apologize for it at all.
Oh, well, thank you. But yeah, I would say just the experiences I get to be around everyone else and hear what got them into bourbon or what excites them and what they want to try in it. But also the people who don't know anything about bourbon and are just willing to ask questions. I don't think any question is a stupid question. So I'm willing to sit there and explain X, Y, and Z to someone if they want to. And I would say 99% of everyone I've met has been a great person. There's the outlier that maybe like, oh, honey, you don't know what you're talking about. And obviously you don't want to have much interaction with somebody who does that. But for the most part, it's just people that make the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Other than the outlier.
Yeah. Other than the outlier.
So, yeah. But now you guys have had a lot of success. And I think I saw last year, was it 2021, that Woodinville was the Small Craft Distiller of the Year for the John Barleycorn Awards. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So you guys, I mean, what does that mean to you guys to have the awards that come in?
I would say almost all of them are astonishing. We don't want to be the most awarded distillery, if that makes sense. We really want to be genuine and not put our name into every hat. We want it to be more word of mouth, I would say, and people really to fall in love with our story and what we have going on and make every connection that we have as organic and impactful as possible. And so when we get something like that, it's kind of surreal because you think of all these other small distilleries that have, they grow their grain on site and then they're mashing it, or they have all these experiences that we may not necessarily have. So it's pretty crazy to be recognized in that sense. And I hope everyone who comes across us either at the liquor store or if they come to the distillery will feel like, oh, there's a lot of pride in the product that we're all putting on the shelf or providing this experience and all that.
Very, very cool. So in terms of the distillery, you guys are open? People can come out for tours?
We are open almost every day of the year, 11 to 5, and we do offer tours more so on the weekends, but, reach out to us. We definitely try to make experiences happen whenever we can. So we treat it like a tasting room, as most of the wineries do in Woodinville. So you can come in at your leisure, try the whiskeys, take a bottle home, leave at that point. There's a tavern right next door that will create beautiful cocktails that we don't necessarily have the supplies for in our tasting room. We just keep it the pure spirit in there, and but it's a great partnership that we have. And we also try with our ambassadors around the country to create memorable experiences where you can try Woodinville wherever our regional ambassadors and sales managers are.
Very nice. So Ariel, what does the future look like for you and for Matt's like,
That's the question.
Yeah. So what does it look like for you and also for Woodinville?
Well, over the next couple of years, we hope to become fully national. So launching a few more states, maybe every year till I think 2026 is our goal, to be in every single state. So
Wow. Okay.
like I mentioned, we're in 23 states in DC right now. So it may take a little bit of time to get there, but 2026, that's our goal. And personally, I just hope to grow with Woodinville and keep being on that commercial plan of getting going with taking Woodinville to as many states as possible, working with the new states, because there's a couple states I haven't seen. I think there's 8 states I still have to go. So if I get to go there in a work capacity, that's pretty awesome to see, as local as you can get. And I just want to keep growing in the whiskey world.
So will we see Ariel Jahn, master blender / possibly master distiller in the future?
I could see master blender, master taster, but I don't know if my chemistry is up enough
I got you.
to be a master distiller.
No, that's great. So we're kind of at the end of the round here. So I'll ask you, where can our listeners find out more about Woodinville? Where can they find you as well?
Absolutely. Our website is woodinvillewhiskeyco.com, and same with our Instagram handle at Woodinville Whiskey Co. I would say those are both great places to check out Woodinville, see what we have going on. We also have a product locator on our website. So if you want to see if there's any store near you or where you're traveling. And I am on Instagram at ARAEJAHN, Ariel Jahn. So I answer all whiskey questions all the time. So feel free to reach out anytime if you have a question about Woodinville or about my experience in the whiskey world.
Very cool. And and she's in Louisville, so take her some prosciutto and just whatever. You can have a conversation. Yeah. So
can't say no to some prosciutto and whiskey.
There you go. Matt, what do you think? Final thoughts. Look, I had to pour myself some more of this port finish. I'm just telling you, this is good stuff. So that's my vote right there. Matt, what about you? Final thoughts on this one?
I think your vote kind of says it all for both of us. It was the first time that I had even really heard of Washington whiskey was Woodinville, and that was when we had it on this show. And even in just the 3 years since then, seeing how the brand has grown and being able to taste through the products, it's grown for a good reason, not just because they have great people like you behind it, who really care and really show a lot of personality and bring the brand to life, but you've got to have something good in the bottle at the end of the day as well. And it really is. It really is great whiskey. It's good drinking. It's got a lot of flavor, a lot of character, and I'm really appreciative of the time that you've taken to sit down with us tonight, and really looking forward to the future for you and for Woodinville as well.
Well, thank you so much. That is very kind of you to say, and I appreciate that you all took the time to taste the whiskeys and hear about my story and journey along with Woodinville and into the whiskey world. And I'm excited to see the growth personally, of course, but also for Woodinville, since I've invested so much time and seen so many, it's been an insane journey to see everyone who's grown with the brand, and also how many lives we've touched, the stories of people saying, hey, I bought this for somebody's graduation or wedding gift or this or that. And it's such an honor to see those personal touches.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I'm excited that we got you on the show finally. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
It has been a lot of fun, Ariel. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again in 3 weeks.
Yes, in 3 weeks, we'll have to have some whiskey together in person.
That's right. And I'll bring the prosciutto. So yeah, awesome. But thank you so much for joining us. So we had a great time tonight. Thank you for sharing these whiskeys with us. Wonderful. Big fan of Woodinville. Like I said, we had the cask strength 3 years ago, one of our first episode. And since then, I've just been like, yeah, Woodinville is doing a great job. So excited to have you on the show, and thank you for joining us tonight. And with that said, I'm going to thank our sponsor. We are the Bourbon Life Podcast, of course, presented by BourbonCon. We've talked about that quite a bit tonight. And hey, you can join us. And Ariel's going to be there. Surprisingly, now we know she saved that little tidbit of information until this round. But that's going to be a good time. January 20th, 21st at the Lexington Marriott's Griffin Gate. here in Lexington. You can check them out online, BourbonConLex.com. You can get tickets there as well. Matt and I will be there recording a podcast live in front of a live studio audience, hopefully on Saturday. That's the plan.
Or in front of the valets out front if they don't let us in.
We could be in the parking lot. We could be on the golf course, wherever.
Yeah.
We're going to be somewhere. We could be in the bar. Who knows?
We
But
might just
we're gonna
stream
be
it here
somewhere.
from the Bourbon Life Studios, but we're going to make it happen.
That's right. But we're looking forward to that. And we want to thank all of our other sponsors as well. We appreciate all of their support, everything they do for us. And we want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us as well. We know there's a lot of podcasts out there, so we appreciate you guys checking us out, spending some time with us, whatever time of day or night it is that you're listening to us. We really appreciate that. If you want to reach out to us, please feel free to do so. You can find us on Instagram at The Bourbon Life or on Facebook. Join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers. You can also email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.